are you and what do you do?
Okay, so I'm Scott. I think everybody knows that by now. And I've been working in product and design for quite a long time. I started way back in the late 80s at Apple. And I was an intern there while I was finishing my university degree, moved on to Microsoft, went to a startup that got bought by Sybase, moved to Autodesk, made my way across the country to New York and started a company and did that for 11 years. And then moved to London and worked for a variety of different companies, most recently SwiftKey, which was a better keyboard for Android and iOS. Microsoft bought them, and I just made the switch and decided to come to Berlin, where I ended up at Babbel. And I've been there now about 3 years.
Okay, nice. That was my next question. So you've been at Babbel for almost 4 years now, or 3 years?
Just 3 years. Just 3 years,
yeah. Can you explain a little bit more how does your role look like at Babbel right now?
At Babbel, I look after a team of designers, researchers, and writers, and we have a studio manager who keeps us focused. And what we do is we take the product strategy that we work on together with other teams, and we help to visualize and create experiences and prototypes that can complete that story. And with effective storytelling, we find a way to communicate with the other disciplines to make sure that what we deliver really works well for our learners.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about the stage Babbel is in right now. Just to set the scene, how many employees does Babbel have at the moment? And how is the team structured? Maybe leading up to the structure of your product team.
So Babbel now has about 700 people working there, which does include some freelancers because we do a lot of language production. In fact, all of the courses and lessons that we prepare are handmade, which means that it can take us a little bit longer to get things done, but the result is really great. And we're structured as a traditional software company. We've got product management, product design, engineering, but we also have, and marketing, don't forget marketing. We have a thriving didactics department. And didactics creates all of this courseware material, and that includes an instructional design department. So people who have teaching degrees who really understand how the human mind thinks.
Yeah, and talking about your product department, how does it look like? How is it structured?
One of the things that we did most recently is we grew up with teams of engineers and product managers, and design was kind of sprinkled throughout, but not as devoted as we wanted. So we thought about the Babbel learner journey and broke it into 3 experience areas. And those areas span the learning journey of anybody who's discovering, learning about trying for the first time, and then subscribing and using Babbel. And we call them impressions, engagement, and learning. And so we've organized the product design team according to those areas. And each area has its own leadership team called an experience group. And the experience groups each have multiple of disciplines. There's six individuals in them. Product design, instructional design, product management, product marketing, analytics, and engineering.
Was it a structure that you figured out yourself, or is there any company where the founders you looked at and said, that's the way we want to do it? Or is it all developed by yourself?
Well, the way that we do it is a bit homegrown, and following the agile principle of don't follow the book, but read the book, understand it, and then adapt it to the needs of the business.
Yep.
But one of the books that inspired me was Organizational Design for Design Orgs, and Spotify with their squads and guilds and tribes, that also inspired us quite heavily.
Okay, yeah. So we spoke obviously earlier before, and you mentioned the theme department leadership. What does it mean in the context of Babbel, that phrase department leadership?
Department leadership at Babbel is a little bit different from that at other businesses, because we have this very strong belief in lateral leadership. And an individual can lead at any level of their career. And that's why we have the experience groups. And being in an experience group doesn't require being a manager or even being a senior or a lead. Anybody can do that. So being a department leader, my responsibility is really to participate in constructing and developing the product strategy and then helping to translate it to messages that help my team of experience group members, and so that we are fully aligned. And I also really focus a lot of my energy on hiring and growing the team, both as individuals and together.
Yeah. So that would lead up to my next question. How do you know that you're succeeding with the way you're structuring the company, the product team, also like develop the product? So what are the measures that you do to tell you that you guys succeed?
We have a lot of internal and one really significant external measure. We use a solution called Beacon. And Beacon is a survey tool that aggregates results from across the industry. And every employee in our area is sent a survey each week, a very short survey. And the answers are all anonymized but sorted by team. And so I can see how my engagement within my team is growing or shrinking over the period of, and it's done every week, so I get a report every week. And that enables me, with anonymized comments, to be able to respond to them. You know, of course, in person, we have a lot of direct feedback, but the people who are a little bit more shy, it gives them the opportunity to tell us things that they might not feel so comfortable to tell us.
Yeah, got it. And maybe let's talk a little bit more about the product now. So what are the measures and the things that you measure, especially for the Babble app?
So first, the methods of measurement. We do qualitative and quantitative work. You know, at the qualitative level, it could be a typical one-on-one usability interviews. We do a lot of that. We do most of it remotely from our American audience, because we have the firm belief that if we can create a product that works really well in the US, it'll scale to other parts of the world, and we've been very successful with that. And then we also do surveys. We recently hired a quant researcher in the UX research team to help us do that in a better way. We also will create prototypes that we run large groups of our audience through, so we can determine how the pathing works and what they like and what they don't like about it, combined with surveys. And then, you know, the holy grail is, of course, doing A/B testing, which we try to do at every opportunity.
Yeah, nice. Maybe one question, because you've been with Babble for 3 years now, and a couple of other startups and larger companies before. How did the feedback process change at Babble, but also over the last years? Is there any pattern that you saw or observed?
I think the biggest thing that changed about the way we gather feedback is the tooling that we've used. And first is the audience harvest. So we use an audience intercept tool. We just switched to Usabilla, which now we can recruit our users from our web, Android, and iOS products directly. So we know that the audience that we're going to be interviewing or surveying, they are product users, and we can use different event triggers or experiences that they've had with the product. So we know who we're talking to in a very effective way, and we can do that in a really nicely scaled way. And then the next thing that we've done, and we use other tools for recruiting people who haven't used the product, but then we do a lot of our interviewing remotely. We found, you know, initially I was a bit skeptical, but what I found is that remote interviewing is really fantastic because of the great cameras and microphones that are built into phones and tablets and that are almost always connected to laptops and desktops. We get great video and audio, and people get to do it from the comfort of their own work or home space.
Yeah, and it could be everyone, like any person that uses Babble, or how do you select those people?
We often select based on the personas that we've developed and the feature or product that we're designing and creating. And so what we'll do is we'll take traits of those individuals and widen them to reach a more evenly or thoroughly distributed audience, and then go ahead and recruit from that group. And it enables us to sprinkle the interviews in and get other work done, in between, so that it isn't just a slog of interview. But we're able to process that information and sometimes even change the prototypes in between based on the feedback that we've received. Oh,
nice. Talking about the transition from like the feedback process is evolving all the time, and it's producing more data for you guys. What is the biggest challenge in that process that you guys face at Babble that brings up some new problems that you maybe haven't seen before?
Well, one of the challenges that I think every tech company really experiences is we want to build everything. We do a lot of design work and we want everything built, and we have finite resources throughout the business. And so if we discover a new tool or a new method that we want to deploy, that always has to be prioritized in as compared to building a new feature or fixing a bug. And so we have to really find ways to prove the value of what we want to do and to be pretty certain that that investment of engineering and product resources is going to result in great outcomes.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about numbers, the outcome of the interviews or the A/B testing and so on. So what are the metrics that you measure and why are those important for you?
So the establishment of standardized metrics throughout the organization has been extremely helpful and productive for us. And at the very beginning, Impressions looks at visit to lead and visit to sale, because we want to make sure that we're engaging with these people in a way that has results. And in engagement and learning, we started with WAPU, the weekly active paying users, but we recently added in a 7-day return to learning, because in order to have a really effective learning product, people have to use it on a regular basis. And what we're always trying to do is to get them to come back to learning even after a few days of a break. Yeah.
And what is, like, right now, the North Star is the 7-day active users right now, or is it the WAPU?
So WAPU is actually the North Star metric, and it's an aggregated metric of the weekly active paying users. And the reason we use paying is because Babble is a subscription service, and the non-paying users have a very limited experience with the product, and it really gives them a nice taste, but we really want them to become active and long-standing users. And that metric, because it's an aggregated metric, it's hard for the individuals in the company to have a real sense of what they're able to impact and how they're able to impact it, which is why we brought in the 7-day return to learning, because that's a more straightforward metric. And with A/B testing, we're able to test the results of a given experiment in a more effective and rapid way.
Yeah, and I'm not super familiar with the app industry, and all the metrics and so behind it, but is there any benchmarking possible with other companies that do similar apps where you say, okay, the WAPU is XYZ number, and this is good and this is bad. So what tells you what's a good number and what's a bad number?
So these numbers are super secret in almost every business, but we look at other types of businesses where people have engagement and have the return to active use. And the comparison that we often make at Babble is, learning a language and subscribing to a language learning service is a little bit like joining a gym. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will join the gym and they get that personal satisfaction and that sense of confidence that they've made that decision, but then they don't go to the gym on a regular basis. They carry the card in their wallet, but they don't actually check in. And so we can look at industry figures that are shared for other businesses that are similar, but we definitely wouldn't be able to get the figures from other language learning services. But what we really do is we look year over year, because Babble has a really strong seasonality effect. And as you might expect, people make New Year's resolutions, so we have a big spike in activity in January, but there's also a 7-day rhythm and a seasonal rhythm based on different types of holidays and when school comes in and lets out. And we look at that very, very carefully.
Yeah. Any other metrics that are important for Babble? For you, for your job?
I think it gets down to at a qualitative usability interviewing level. We really do look at the number of lessons completed. We look at the time that individuals spend in a lesson, mm-hmm. And in the individual components of the lessons we call trainers. And so we look at those behaviors and we look at the types of things that people are doing in the product. And that's really, really important for us to understand whether we're doing the right things or not.
Okay. Talking about the WAPU and other metrics, what are some challenges that come with those metrics? Maybe in the measuring process, maybe in the what do you make out of the results process? Is there any kind of challenges involved? I guess so.
Well, there are tons of challenges, because when we first established the WAPU North Star metric, we tried to get estimates of the impact of a given project. on WAPU? What will be the WAPU impact? And the reality is it's guesswork. Even if it's really, really smartly educated guesswork, it's going to be guessing. And so we still have difficult decisions to make. And that's what makes this lean design and build approach to software development really, really important. We need to find ways to establish suitable slices of a feature and the minimum viable iterations so that we can measure and see. And we have to really make the commitment to do 2 or 3 of those iterations before we ditch a particular approach. Because if one more iteration would have made a big impact, it would be a real shame if we lost something. So it makes each decision cycle really difficult. And the results have proven to be pretty good because we have made some improvements in these numbers, and that's been really gratifying.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think this covers a little bit the core part, the feedback things, and maybe one more question about your past. Your past roles. You were working for Microsoft, for Apple back in the days, yeah? Only a few years back, of course. Yeah.
Only a few years.
Yeah. And what are the learnings that you had there and the experience that you made that are still valid and helpful today for your job? Is there anything you can share?
There are a lot of things that I learned, and I keep learning again and again. And one of the things that's most important is that it's really critical to create an environment where individuals want to come to work. So the spaces have to be designed in a comfortable and suitable and productive way, but also with a little bit of a surprise and delight. And of course, we do that with app design and website design, but we also need to do that in our work environments. And Apple did that especially well, where every floor, every work area was a little bit different, and they hired designers to do that. And that really taught me in creating my own business and in contributing to the ideas for the new building that Babble is constructing from the inside out, that we really want to make work a fun place to be.
Yeah. And one last question. Maybe you can tell us, the audience, how do you got your job at Babble? Because I think it also has a little bit to do with feedback.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I'm laughing because it's one of my favorite employment stories. And in fact, it is the favorite story. So when I first moved to Berlin, I didn't move there with a job. I moved there and had enrolled in an intensive German course, which is when I learned that German is really hard. And I heard a couple of chuckles here from people who understand. But so while I was in German class, I stayed in an Airbnb, thanks to Colleen. I loved the platform, and it was a really interesting space. But the internet didn't work in the area that I was living in that property. So I joined the main house and was working in there. And the host invited me to dinner one night. And at dinner, or while he was preparing food, he said, "How's your German class going?" And I said, I love the German class. I think it's going really well. But I think instead of doing the homework, I'm just going to use an app and study with an app in addition. And he said, well, why not use Babble? Because he worked at Babble in customer service, and obviously he's really happy with working there. And so I tried it out, and I went through the initial funnel experience and got completely immersed in it and fell in love with the product from that very minute. And over the next 3 or 4 months in Berlin, I did my best to try to meet Markus Witte, our CEO at the time. And by chance, I went to a Babble trade group event, and it was a complete surprise that Markus introduced the event. And I was seated very conveniently. So right after he spoke, I walked over to him, and I tapped him on the shoulder. And I said, he looked at me, he was quite surprised. And I said, Markus, I use your product every day, and I love it. And I would love to come and work with you to help make it better. And he and Arne Schepker, our current CEO, were in the office. It was a Friday evening, and I sat and I talked to them for an hour and a half. And 2.5 weeks later, I had a job offer, and I've been very happy there ever since.
Fantastic story. Thanks, Scott. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's maybe open up for some questions from the audience, if that's possible.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, cool. Any questions? There's one hand. Another one.
Now it's working. I have a question. How do you get to the users to engage in your user testing? Do you offer them anything in return, or, yeah?
So we use a lot of different methods to recruit and incent research participants. One is vouchers with the product. We could extend their subscription or offer them one that they could give away. But we often just use vouchers for Amazon or other services, depending on where they're located.
One quick question. Could you please share with us one story of a successful project that you launched and that was very successful on the customer engagement with the product?
Thank you for that question, because it's a story I also love. It was, we call it the can-do placement test. So we created an innovation team and who worked together for a while to come up with new ideas for potential new products. And one of the ideas that came from the instructional designer was, instead of a traditional placement test, which is multiple choice, which just asks questions about grammar and vocabulary, we asked people to evaluate themselves in different capacities of how they could communicate. Like, how comfortable are you ordering a coffee? And it's a slider, and we created a really beautiful experience where, it changes color and shape as you move the slider with the different answers. Not very well, really well, I'm super confident in this. And it's a series of, between 5 and 10 questions, depending on the decision tree. And when we built it into the funnel. And we went through design, prototyping, user testing, iteration, and then construction. And then when we built it, we had a really big surprise, because we expected maybe people would complete more lessons if they were placed more effectively in the product. But what we found is it actually increased visit to lead and visit to sale by a surprising amount. And so that was an incredible success. And that was actually the most successful project of that quarter. The team were delighted, and the business, of course, was super happy.
What is your key to keeping the process short and sleek, to find quick decisions on which trails to follow and which not?
That is also a great question. And we don't do these experiments in a sequential way. The secret to making that run efficiently is to run these things in an overlapping way, to be running user tests every week and to be developing prototypes and iterating them all at the same time, so that we have the next best thing to build and not just a decision between 2 or 3 different things. But sometimes that, we might end up with that limitation, but most of the time we really know what we want to do next based on the results that we've gotten.
Thank you.
Scott, do you use OKRs at Babble, and if yes, how?
We certainly do use OKRs, and we're doing the rollout for the first quarter of next year right now. We've been working both with internal and external consultants, and we established the secrets to our success right now are that we've established 3 objectives, and only 3 at the top level, and each team is going to be really focused on 1 KR for each of those objectives. And we're doing an OKR marketplace where the teams are sharing them with each other, so that we can do a really great and beautiful alignment. Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Das war Scott Weiss und Till Ohrmann.